I never meant for my life to change in that single, delicate moment, yet even now I can still feel the quiet tremor that ran through me when she said my name. Not the way most people say it, flat, ordinary, forgettable, but with that strange, slow softness, as if she had already decided something about me long before I ever realized it myself. It was the kind of voice that rearranges the air around you, that makes you feel seen and undone at the same time. I remember standing there in her sunlit sitting room, feeling like every unspoken truth I'd carried for years was suddenly visible on my skin. The curtains were drawn halfway, spilling warm golden light across the floor, and for some reason that made it feel even harder to breathe. I had come only to help her organize old books for a small community event, nothing dramatic, nothing life-altering. But from the way she watched me, I sensed she already knew I wasn't quite the person I pretended to be in the world outside her home. 5 years, she murmured, not looking up from the box she was sorting. That's how long loyalty takes to grow real roots. I didn't understand why she chose that moment to say it. I didn't understand why she was saying it to me. But my heart reacted before my mind did, thudding in my chest as if something long hidden recognized the meaning before I could translate it. She lifted her eyes then, steady, calm, almost unsettling, and I felt a warmth sweep through me that I wasn't prepared for. Not romantic, not frightening, just profoundly disarming. She evaluated me with a kind of certainty I had never been able to apply to myself. "You're careful with everything you touch," she said, "even the things you don't think matter." I tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out too thin, too nervous. My palms felt warm, my breath felt shallow. I had always been sensitive, though I hid it behind polite nods and practical tasks. I never expected anyone to notice. But she noticed everything. She always did. Her name was Alina, though everyone in the community called her Mistress Alina, not in any dramatic or improper way, but because she ran the etiquette and arts classes taught in the old estate near the edge of town. People respected her naturally. She carried herself with a poise that made you straighten your back without realizing you were doing it. I'd volunteered to help her simply because she asked, and I had always struggled to say no to her. Not because I feared her, quite the opposite. She carried a warmth that made you feel safe enough to hear truths you would otherwise run from. While we worked, she kept glancing at me with that thoughtful expression, as if she were studying a puzzle piece she'd been waiting to place for a very long time. Every time our eyes met, something fluttered in my chest, a quiet, confusing shift I didn't yet have the vocabulary for. At one point she paused, dusting her hands on a cloth as she stepped closer. "You always wear such guarded colors," she said softly, gesturing to my gray shirt. "Muted tones, as if you're trying not to disturb anyone." I shrugged, unsure what to say. I had never liked drawing attention. I had always been more comfortable fading into corners, observing life instead of stepping into it. But she continued, her voice gentler now. "Do you know what I see? Someone who's been waiting far too long to feel allowed." That word caught something inside me, allowed to express softness, allowed to move differently, allowed to question who I was allowed to be. I felt a tremor run through me, subtle yet unmistakable. Mistress Alina must have seen the reaction, because her eyes softened even more. "You should come tomorrow," she said. "I'm reorganizing the petticoat room. You could learn something about colors and maybe about yourself." The way she said yourself made my throat tighten. I knew she didn't mean it casually. She never spoke casually. And though I didn't fully understand why, the invitation felt less like a suggestion and more like a door opening. Quietly, vaguely, dangerously, into a part of me I had spent years quietly avoiding. I went home that evening trying to convince myself it was nothing unusual, just a volunteer task, just another small way to be helpful. Yet I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the soft glimmer in her gaze, the way she had looked at me as though she knew a version of me I hadn't met yet, a version I wasn't sure I was ready to meet. By morning, something in me had already surrendered. My feet moved on their own, carrying me back to her estate long before I'd fully decided to go. And the moment I stepped through the doorway, she gave me a knowing smile, warm, kind, patient, as if she had been expecting exactly this. As if she knew this was the first real step of a 5-year journey that would reshape me entirely. Into something softer, braver, more honest than anything I had ever let myself imagine. The room that changed the sound of my heartbeat. The old estate felt different that morning, quieter, almost expectant, as if the walls themselves were aware of something shifting in me. I paused at the entrance, my hand resting on the cool brass handle, wondering why my pulse was so unsteady. I wasn't doing anything extraordinary. I wasn't breaking any rules. I was simply returning to help with more organizing. Yet it felt like stepping into a version of the world where every small detail suddenly meant something. Mistress Alina appeared at the top of the stairs, her presence somehow both elegant and comfortable, like a familiar melody I hadn't heard since childhood. Her expression brightened when she saw me, though not with surprise, more with quiet confirmation. "I knew you would come," she said warmly. There was no pressure in her voice, no demand, just certainty. It unsettled me in a way that made my chest feel warm. She guided me down a hallway I hadn't visited before, lined with framed sketches of gowns and silhouettes from different eras. Some were so detailed they almost looked alive. I found myself slowing down to look at them, drawn to the softness in the lines, the graceful curves of the fabric, the gentle way each figure held themselves. "You're noticing them," she said behind me, her tone almost satisfied. "Good." I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words dissolved. I had noticed them, more deeply than I intended. She gestured to a door at the end of the corridor. "This is where we begin." The door creaked gently as she pushed it open, revealing a room bathed in pale morning light. For a moment, I didn't breathe. Fabric. Everywhere. Soft pastel petticoats hung in color gradients along the walls, lavenders fatting into blues, blush pinks melting into creams. Ribbons were neatly folded in little wooden trays, their textures ranging from silk to cotton. There were mannequins dressed in half-constructed garments, lace draped across them like delicate frost. It was the most tender room I had ever stepped into. And stepping inside felt like walking into the truth of a dream I didn't remember choosing. Mistress Alina watched my reaction closely, her hands clasped. "People think softness is simple," she said, "but it's not. It's brave. It requires you to understand yourself." I swallowed, unsure why her words stirred something inside me. Why show me this?" "Because," she answered, "you've been carrying softness with you for years, and you've been terrified to let anyone see it." My breath caught. Her voice softened even further. "But I see it, even when you try to hide it, and it's time you get to see it too." She moved to a shelf and pulled out a small, cloud-like petticoat, white, faintly shimmering at the edges. The kind of garment that looked weightless, like it was made to float rather than simply rest on fabric. "This one," she said, turning it over in her hands, "is where most of my students begin." "Students?" The word surprised me. I'm not a student," I whispered, unsure of anything anymore. She stepped closer, her expression kind but unwavering. "You are today." A strange mix of nerves and warmth washed over me. My instinct was to step back, retreat, pretend none of this stirred anything. But something else inside me, quiet, small, yet impossibly determined, pushed me forward instead. "May I show you something?" she asked. I nodded, though my hands felt cold. She held the petticoat up against my waist, not touching me, just close enough that the light fabric brushed the air around me like a suggestion. It wasn't the contact that startled me, it was the way my heart reacted, beating in a rhythm that felt foreign yet honest. For a second, we both stayed still. Then she smiled a small, knowing smile. "See, you felt that." My voice was barely audible. "I don't know what I'm feeling." "You're feeling recognized," she said gently, "maybe for the first time." Her words were too true, too real. I wasn't ready to admit it out loud, but I felt the ground shifting beneath me, the quiet rearrangement of identity, the fragile beginnings of something I had kept locked away for years. She lowered the petticoat, letting me breathe again. "This room isn't about costumes or fabric," she said softly. "It's about reflection. You learn who you are by noticing what resonates." I looked around the room again, and every color, every ribbon, every soft detail seemed to whisper to a part of me I had always silenced. "I want you to help me sort these," she continued, motioning to a collection of folded petticoats. "You'll learn more by touching them than by looking at them." I hesitated only a moment before joining her on the floor. As I unfolded each piece of fabric, something in me loosened, slowly, subtly, like a tightly wound string easing without snapping. I traced the hems, the delicate stitching, the gentle frills, and each touch made my chest feel fuller, as if I were holding something that had been missing from me rather than just a garment. Mistress Alina watched quietly, her gaze patient and proud. "We'll go slowly," she said. 5 years is a long journey, but every journey begins with one quiet moment of honesty. 5 years. The phrase echoed in my mind again, the way she'd said it yesterday. I didn't yet understand what she saw in me. But I knew this. Something inside me had woken up in that room. And there was no going back to sleep. The first time she said I belonged. I returned the next day without even thinking about it. My feet carried me along the gravel path leading to the estate as if they knew a truth my mind was still avoiding. The morning air felt different on my skin, cooler, sharper, like the world had quietly changed its angle overnight. Or maybe it was just me. Mistress Alina greeted me at the door with a soft smile, the kind that made my chest ache for reasons I didn't dare examine. "You came early," she observed. I hadn't realized I had. I couldn't sleep. Her eyes warmed, not sympathetically, understandingly. "Good, it means something is unfolding." I didn't know what to do with that sentence, so I simply followed her as she turned and headed toward the petticoat room again. But halfway down the hall, she paused at a different door. A smaller one, painted a gentle cream color, almost blending into the wall. She placed her hand on the knob, then looked at me. "Before we continue, there's something I want to show you, something important." My stomach fluttered with nerves. "What is it?" "You'll see," she said, opening the door. I stepped through and stopped breathing. It was another room, softer than the petticoat room, but in a completely different way. The walls were a muted rose, with shelves lined not with garments but with mirrors, tall ones, oval ones, vintage ones with intricate gold frames. In the center stood a single wooden stool, positioned under a skylight that poured down natural light like a spotlight waiting for someone who never believed they deserved to stand in it. "This," Mistress Alina said gently, "is where my students learn to see themselves." I swallowed, my throat dry. Why bring me here?" She tapped her finger lightly against the nearest mirror. "Because reflection requires courage, and I believe you're ready for your first step." My heart banged against my ribs, uneven and uneasy. I had never liked mirrors. They always felt like they were catching me in some fragile lie I didn't know how to confess. "I don't think," I started, but she stepped closer, her voice a whisper soft enough to disarm any protest. "You're safe here." The way she said safe felt like an anchor. Something inside me loosened, reluctantly but undeniably. She motioned me toward the stool. I hesitated only a moment before sitting down, hands clasped tightly in my lap. The light from above was unforgiving, not harsh, just honest. Too honest. I stared at my knees, afraid to lift my gaze even a fraction. Mistress Alina knelt beside me, placing something on the floor that I recognized only by the faint rustle. A petticoat. Not the white one from yesterday. This one was softer, pale pink with a subtle sheen, delicate enough to seem unreal. "I want you to hold this," she said. My hands shook as I reached for it. When the fabric touched my fingers, a warmth spread through me, so immediate it almost startled me. Not physical warmth, something deeper, like recognition blooming inside my chest. "This is just fabric," she said, "but how you react to it, that's truth." I closed my eyes briefly, the petticoat light and impossibly gentle between my hands. I felt my shoulders tremble. When I opened my eyes, she was watching my face, not my hands. "Look up," she whispered. I did. And for the first time, I truly saw my own reflection, not the rushed, guarded image I usually caught in passing, but something rawer, something vulnerable. My eyes looked softer, my posture more tentative. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, it was the suggestion of one, like a sketch waiting for its final lines. Mistress Alina touched the mirror lightly, as if guiding my gaze. "You see that?" she asked. I don't know what I'm looking at." "Yes," she said softly, "you do." I swallowed hard, my voice barely audible. "It feels like someone else." "It's you," she corrected gently. "A version you've kept beneath layers of expectation, a version that deserves space." I felt my chest tighten, not painfully, but with a fullness I didn't know how to contain. My eyes stung, though no tears fell. She continued, her voice steady and warm. "You belong here, in softness, in honesty, in your own truth." The word belong hit me harder than I expected. It landed somewhere deep, someplace that had never been touched with that kind of certainty. I didn't know why it meant so much. Maybe because I had spent years feeling like I existed on the edges of everything, never quite fitting, never quite understanding why. I held the petticoat tighter, my breath trembling. "I don't know how to be this," I whispered. "You don't have to know," she said. "You only have to allow." Her reassurance settled over me like the gentlest weight, grounding and terrifying all at once. For the first time, the mirror didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a door, quiet, patient, waiting for me to choose whether to step through. Mistress Alina rose gracefully and extended her hand. "Come," she said softly. "There's more for you to discover." And I followed, not because I understood where this path was leading, but because for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't walking alone. The day she taught me how to move differently. Mistress Alina led me down another hallway, quieter than the rest of the estate, the air holding a kind of deliberate stillness. Every step echoed softly, as if the house itself were listening. I followed closely, my hands still tingling from the memory of the petticoat's delicate fabric. My heartbeat hadn't returned to its normal rhythm. It felt suspended somewhere between fear and awakening. She paused in front of a room with double doors. Not ornate, not imposing. Just important. When she pushed them open, I felt a shift inside me before I even stepped through. It was a practice studio, wide wooden floors, soft light, and long curtains that moved with the faint breeze. There were no costumes laid out here, no mirrors crowding every wall. Just space. Honest, open space. Space that made me aware of my own shape, my own movements, in a way I wasn't prepared for. Mistress Alina stepped to the center of the room, her posture serene, her expression calm. "This," she said gently, "is where you learn to inhabit yourself." I stayed near the door, uncertain. Inhabit myself. She tilted her head slightly. "You've walked your whole life trying not to be noticed, shoulders tucked in, steps minimized, breath held, as though taking space is something you must apologize for." I lowered my gaze, embarrassed at how accurately she saw me. It had always been instinct. Move quietly, blend in, don't disturb the edges of the world. "But," she continued, "there is a different way to exist, a softer way, not smaller, softer, there's a difference." She beckoned me with one hand. "Come here." I hesitated for only a moment before walking toward her. My footsteps sounded too loud on the wooden floor, and I cringed internally at the way I carried myself, rigid, awkward, unsure. Mistress Alina saw all of it, of course. She saw everything. She positioned me beside her, then spoke softly. "Your shoulders, let them breathe." She didn't touch me. She didn't have to. I felt myself slowly loosen, though the movement felt foreign, like trying on a new language I wasn't fluent in yet. "Good," she murmured. "Now your hands, don't grip them, let them fall naturally." My hands unclasped, fingers relaxing, nerves buzzing. "Better," she said. The praise was gentle, but it warmed something deep inside my chest. Then she stepped a half pace in front of me. "Now watch carefully." She took a single step forward. Not dramatic, not grand. Just a step, soft, deliberate, graceful in a way that felt almost impossible to replicate. The movement flowed through her as if her body understood harmony the way a musician understands rhythm. It wasn't exaggerated, it wasn't artificial. It was simply calm, balanced, honest. This, she said, is how softness moves. It is deliberate, present, not apologetic. I stared, my breath caught somewhere between admiration and fear. She turned to me. Try. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. I wasn't sure I could mimic it. My body had never moved like hers, never moved like anyone who deserved elegance. But she waited patiently, her eyes encouraging without pressure. I took a step, and immediately felt wrong. Too stiff, too heavy, too mechanical. I winced. I can't. Again, she said softly. I tried again, and again. Each time something felt off. My movements were fragmented, uncertain. I felt painfully aware of my limbs, my posture, the awkwardness of translating something so gentle into a body trained for invisibility. After a few attempts, frustration prickled in my chest. I'm not meant for this, I muttered under my breath. I don't fit into these shapes. Mistress Alina stepped closer, her expression calm but firm. Listen to me, she said. You are not learning to imitate softness. You are learning to recognize your own version of it. I blinked, confused. My own version. Yes, she said. You think you must move like someone else, but transformation is not copying, it is revealing. There is a way you move when you allow yourself to exist without fear. Her words sank in slowly, like water soaking into dry soil. She stepped back, giving me space. Close your eyes. I hesitated, then obeyed. Don't think, she whispered. Just breathe. Then take one step, not the way you think you should, but the way your heart wants to. I waited. The silence felt vast around me. I inhaled shakily. Exhaled. Then I took a step. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't theatrical. It was small but soft, natural, honest. When I opened my eyes, she was smiling. The kind of smile that told me she saw something I didn't yet know how to see in myself. There, she said, that is the beginning. Warmth bloomed in my chest. Not pride, not victory, but relief. Relief at being allowed to exist in a way that didn't feel wrong. She motioned for me to follow again, and together we practiced simple movements. Steps, gestures, turns, nothing dramatic, nothing forced. Just slow, intentional inhabiting of space. With each movement, something inside me shifted small piece by small piece. I began to sense a softness I had never allowed myself to acknowledge, a version of myself who wasn't hiding, who wasn't afraid of being seen in a gentler shape. After a long while, she finally spoke. You're learning, she said, not because you're changing into someone else, but because you're uncovering someone you've always been. Her words felt like they settled into the structure of my ribs. And for the first time, I wondered, quietly, cautiously, if she might be right. The moment she trusted me with color. The next morning, I stood in front of my closet for far too long, staring at the same monochrome shirts and muted tones that had made up my entire wardrobe for years. Gray, navy, black, an endless echo of safe choices. Choices that kept me invisible. Choices that kept me small. But now they felt wrong. Not bad. Just wrong, like they didn't belong to the person who had taken that soft, honest step in the practice studio the day before. I finally picked the least gray shirt I owned, a faded blue one that barely counted as color, and walked to the estate with the strange feeling that my heartbeat was somehow ahead of me, pulling me forward. Mistress Alina greeted me at the door with a warm glance that lingered on my shirt for only a second. But that second felt like it mattered. You're beginning to choose differently, she said simply. I didn't know whether to feel proud or exposed. She led me not to the petticoat room and not to the studio, but to a small room I hadn't seen before. Inside, sunlight filtered through lace curtains, illuminating a long table covered with rolls of fabric in every shade imaginable. This room was alive with color. Peach, lavender, mint rose, sky blue, soft gold. Hues that seemed to hum gently in the light. I stopped in the doorway, overwhelmed. Mistress Alina spoke softly. "Today, you learn the language of color." I blinked. I don't know how to understand color. "You do," she said. "You just don't trust that you do." She stepped toward the table and unrolled a piece of fabric, a soft, airy material in a shade of warm blush. It glowed almost imperceptibly, as if it carried a secret warmth inside it. "Touch it," she encouraged. My fingers brushed the cloth. It was cool at first, then warmed under my skin. The color made my chest expand in a way I couldn't name. Something about it felt gentle, forgiving, almost hopeful. I didn't realize I had inhaled sharply until Mistress Alina's gaze softened. "You feel something," she murmured. "Don't hide the reaction." "I'm not hiding anything," I said too quickly. She raised an eyebrow. "Then why did you pull your hand away?" Heat crept up my neck. She was right. I had reacted, and the reaction had scared me, because it was honest, because it came from a place I had spent years ignoring. "I don't know how to explain what I felt," I admitted quietly. "You don't need to explain," she said. "Just allow it." She guided me to the other fabrics. One by one, I touched them, the cool calm of lavender, the airy innocence of pale blue, the fresh whisper of mint, the subtle warmth of soft peach. Each color had its own emotion, its own presence, its own relationship with me. And with each brush of my fingertips, I felt little pieces of myself shifting into focus. Mistress Alina watched me with the patience of someone who understood this process far better than I did. After a while, she reached for a deeper shade, a dusky rose, muted yet undeniably beautiful. She held it up to my chest, letting the light catch the fabric. She didn't touch me, just observed the color against my form. Something in my chest tightened. The color suited me, so much so that it unsettled me. "Mistress," I murmured, unsure. She spoke before I could finish. "Not every color reveals who you want to be. Some reveal who you could be." I swallowed. "It feels too much." "Too true," she corrected softly. "There's a difference." Her gaze lifted to my face, steady and encouraging. "I want you to choose one," she said. "A single color from this room, one that feels honest even if it scares you." The request hit me harder than I expected. Choosing a color felt intimate, like choosing a truth I could no longer pretend not to see. I looked at the fabrics again. The lavender was calming. The pale blue was gentle. The peach was hopeful. But the dusky rose, the one she had held up to me, made something deep in my chest tremble. It didn't scream or demand attention. It simply felt right in a quiet, undeniable way. I hesitated, then reached out and touched it with a trembling hand. "This one," I whispered. Mistress Alina's eyes softened, pride flickering through them. "Good." She folded the fabric carefully and placed it in my hands. Its weight was surprisingly light. Its meaning was surprisingly heavy. "Keep it," she said. "It will be the first piece of your personal collection." "My personal collection." She nodded. "Every student builds one. It is not about costumes or performance. It is about claiming the parts of yourself you once feared." I looked down at the fabric, my fingers gently curling around the soft folds. It felt like holding a fragile version of myself, one that needed care, patience, and honesty. Mistress Alina stepped closer, her voice quiet but firm. "This," she said, tapping the folded cloth lightly, "is the first truth you've chosen for yourself." My breath trembled. "What does that mean?" She smiled gently, the kind of smile that had no urgency, only certainty. "It means," she said, "that your transformation has begun." The room fell silent around us, the air charged with a fragile new understanding. And for the first time since stepping into the estate, I felt something subtle but powerful. Belonging. Not to a place. Not to a role. To myself. The day the world outside finally noticed. I carried the dusky rose fabric home pressed gently against my chest, terrified someone might see it and ask the questions I wasn't ready to answer. It felt like a secret I had no language for, fragile, trembling, and quietly life-altering. When I reached my room, I set the fabric on my desk and just stared at it. It glowed softly in the evening light, as if waiting for me to admit its importance. But instead of peace, a strange fear crept in. Not fear of Mistress Alina. Not fear of the estate. Fear of the outside world, the people who expected me to stay inside the lines I had lived within for years. The people who didn't know anything had changed. The next morning, that fear followed me like a shadow as I walked to the estate. I was halfway there when it happened. A familiar voice called out, "Hey, you heading to the community house again?" I froze. It was a neighbor, casual acquaintance, harmless, the kind of person who noticed routines without meaning to. He jogged up next to me, cheerful and unaware of the internal chaos unfolding in my chest. "You've been going there a lot lately," he remarked lightly. "Helping that lady, the one who teaches, what is it, etiquette classes?" I felt my throat tighten. Etiquette classes. That was one way of putting it, I supposed. The simplest possible version of something infinitely more complex. "Yeah," I said quickly, hoping my voice sounded normal. "Just volunteering." He shrugged. "That's good of you. Hey, if she ever needs help lifting anything heavy, let me know. I don't mind." I nodded, but my nerves were already spiraling. The world was noticing my pattern. My quiet, delicate steps into softness were leaving footprints I couldn't hide. As soon as he waved goodbye and jogged down another street, I exhaled shakily. My palms were sweaty, my heart was racing, and suddenly doubts crept in fast and invasive. What if someone misunderstood? What if they asked questions I wasn't ready to answer? What if this fragile part of me couldn't withstand the weight of the outside world? By the time I reached the estate, I felt like I was carrying every fear I'd ever had. Mistress Alina must have sensed it the moment she opened the door. Her expression softened instantly. "You're unsettled." The words slipped out before I could stop them. "Someone saw me coming here." She regarded me quietly, thoughtfully. "And that frightened you?" I nodded, feeling ashamed to admit it. "Come," she said gently. She led me to the sitting room, not the petticoat room, not the studio, not the mirror chamber. The sitting room was normal, warm, safe. She motioned for me to sit, then settled across from me. "When you begin to grow," she said softly, "the world will notice. That is inevitable." I swallowed, but I'm not ready for people to assume things. Her voice was calm. "Let them assume. They will never know your truth unless you choose to share it. I just don't want them to misunderstand." "Then understand yourself," she replied, her gaze steady but kind. "Once you know who you are becoming, the misunderstandings of others lose their power." It was too honest, too direct. It struck something deeply vulnerable in me. She continued, her tone gentler now. "Transformation is not meant to stay hidden forever. It asks something of you. It asks for courage." I stared at my hands. "I don't think I have that kind of courage." "You do," she said. "You proved it when you chose your first color." Her reminder made my chest tighten with both fear and pride. But I hesitated. What if they laugh or judge me or think I'm strange? She leaned forward slightly, her expression unwavering. "Let me tell you something," she said. "People are comfortable with what is simple, what is predictable, what is familiar. But you," she paused, as if choosing the right word, "you are becoming someone honest, and honesty in any form unsettles those who live behind masks." I breathed in slowly, letting her words settle. Then she added, almost in a whisper, "And those who truly belong in your life will not fear your softness." The room felt impossibly still. The air felt heavier, richer, fuller. Something inside me cracked open, not in a breaking way, but like a seed finally splitting because it was time to grow. Mistress Alina stood. "Come," she said. "I want to show you what courage looks like in practice." She led me back to the hallway and opened the petticoat room door. The soft colors greeted me like old friends, or new ones I was terrified to embrace. She lifted the dusky rose fabric, the one I'd chosen the day before, holding it with a reverence that made my breath catch. "This," she said, "is your choice, your truth, your voice." She placed the fabric in my hands again, and this time it didn't feel fragile. It felt like possibility. "Carry it with you today," she instructed. "Not hidden, not stuffed away. Let it exist in your hands without apology." My heart pounded. "Outside, where people can see." She nodded, even if only for a moment. I hesitated, my fear almost won. But something stronger rose up, a thin, trembling thread of courage woven through my chest. I whispered, "Okay." Mistress Alina smiled, not triumphantly, not proudly, but with a deep, knowing tenderness. "This," she said softly, "is the beginning of being unafraid." And so, with my hands shaking and my heart thundering, I stepped back outside, the dusky rose fabric held openly at my side for the very first time. Not hidden, not disguised, seen. And though the world didn't stop, something inside me quietly began to shift. A new kind of bravery, forming in the space where fear had lived for far too long. I never imagined that loyalty, something so simple, so quiet, could reshape the architecture of my entire identity. Yet by the time the 5th year in Mistress Alina's household approached, loyalty wasn't just a choice I made every morning. It was the gravity my world orbited around. The day that proved this arrived without warning. I woke before dawn, as always, but something in the hallway felt off. Silence had a different texture, as though the house itself were holding its breath. When I stepped out of my room, my soft gray uniform freshly pressed, my apron neatly tied, the air tasted unfamiliar, thick with some undefined tension. Mistress Alina was waiting in the kitchen, seated at the old wooden table as if she'd been there for hours. Her posture was calm, but her eyes had that unreadable stillness that always frightened me more than anger ever could. She gestured for me to sit. I obeyed with careful steps, my heart rattling like teacups on a silver tray. "I've been watching you," she said quietly. "Not to judge, to understand." My throat tightened. I didn't know if I'd done something wrong or something right. With her, either possibility carried weight. She studied my face for a long moment, and I could feel heat rising under my skin. 5 years of petticoats, obedience, discipline, trust, yet somehow I felt more vulnerable now than on the very first day. "You've changed," she continued. "Not in the way I expected, not in the way you expected either." My fingers knotted together in my lap. "Mistress, I only ever wanted to be what you asked." "I know." She leaned back slightly, her expression softening in a way that startled me. "That's the remarkable part. You didn't just follow instructions. You grew into the person those instructions revealed." A strange pressure stirred in my chest. Fear, pride, confusion, all interwoven so tightly I couldn't tell one from another. "Mistress, what does that mean?" She rose from the chair and approached me slowly. My breath hitched when she placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, not commanding, not testing, just steady, warm. "It means," she said, "that you no longer move like someone pretending to belong in these clothes. You carry them like truth. You've become fluent in a language you didn't know you were learning." Her words struck something deep inside me, a part of me I'd avoided acknowledging for years. I felt it tremble awake now, in full view, no longer willing to be ignored. I blinked rapidly, fighting back a wave of emotion I didn't have a name for. I don't know what to do with that." She nodded, as though she'd expected that answer. "That's why today will be different." I looked up sharply. "Different how?" Mistress Alina stepped aside and opened the kitchen door. Outside, the morning light spilled across the backyard like something newly discovered. But what seized my breath wasn't the sunrise. It was the small suitcase sitting on the patio stones. My suitcase. Packed. Waiting. "Mistress," my voice shook. "You're going out today," she said. "Dressed as you, not as a role, not as a task, Not because I told you to. Her eyes held mine with unwavering clarity. You will go into town exactly as the person you've become, and you will decide for yourself what that means. My pulse turned into a drum in my ears. Town, outside, public. The idea felt enormous, impossible, like stepping off the edge of a cliff into an unknown world. I'm not ready, I whispered. You are, she said. You just haven't believed it yet. I stood there frozen, trapped between terror and a kind of quiet exhilaration. 5 years of small steps, little routines, subtle growth, and now she wanted me to leap. Mistress Alina rested her hands lightly on my arms, grounding me. I'm not sending you away. I'm letting you see yourself without the frame of my walls. The house really did feel like a frame then, one that had shaped me, held me, transformed me. And now she was asking me to step outside and test whether the portrait could stand on its own. My voice was barely audible. What if I disappoint you? Her answer came without hesitation. You could never disappoint me by becoming yourself. Those words unraveled something inside me so quickly I had to close my eyes to keep from shaking apart. When I finally opened them, the suitcase was still there, waiting. A mirrored version of the years behind it, small, quiet, and containing so much more than its size suggested. I took a breath that felt like my first. Okay, I whispered. I'll try. Mistress Alina gave a single approving nod, as if my courage were the final piece she'd been waiting for all along. And as I stepped toward the doorway with trembling hands and a heart ready to burst, I realized something I hadn't understood until that moment. This wasn't the end of obedience. It was the beginning of ownership. The suitcase felt heavier than it should have, as if the fabric itself understood the magnitude of what I was about to do. The morning air wrapped around me, cool and fragile, trembling on my skin the same way I trembled inside. For a moment, I stood at the edge of the patio, staring at the gate that led out to the world I'd avoided for 5 years. Mistress Alina didn't follow me outside. She stayed in the doorway, watching with an unreadable calm that steadied me even as everything in me felt like it was breaking open. You'll know what to do, she said softly. Her words floated through the air like a gentle push. I swallowed, gave the smallest nod, and stepped through the gate. The click behind me sounded louder than it should have, the quiet punctuation on 5 years of learning how to exist within her walls. And now, here I was, walking down the street dressed not in a costume or a role, but in the person those years had quietly sculpted. My breath came shallow at first. Every footstep felt too loud. Every passing car made my heart jolt. Yet with each step, something strange and unexpected began to settle over me. Familiarity. A sense that my body wasn't fighting itself for once. My movements blended into the morning rhythm the way music blends into silence, softly, carefully, but undeniably present. At the bus stop, a woman glanced at me. Not a long look, not a startled one, just a simple, passing glance. A normal glance for a normal girl on a normal morning. Something inside me cracked. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't exposed. I wasn't judged. I was just there. The bus arrived with a sigh of brakes. I climbed aboard, palms sweating, and sat by the window. My reflection stared back. Gentle features, a soft frame, calm eyes bruised slightly with fear, but also lit with something else. Recognition. I rode all the way into town, each passing block unfolding like a forgotten chapter. The noise, the people, the everyday messiness, it overwhelmed me, yet it also anchored me. These were things I'd hidden from, convinced they would break me. And somehow, instead of shattering, I felt myself settling into place. I walked by shop windows, watching my reflection gliding beside me, steady, natural, unforced. Every now and then I'd catch myself smiling at nothing, marveling at how quietly confidence can bloom when it's given space. A small cafe stood at the corner of Maple Street, the same one I used to walk past years ago before everything changed. Back then, I never had the courage to step inside. Now, I pushed the door open. Warmth washed over me, coffee, pastries, sunlight painted in gold across wooden tables. The barista smiled. "Good morning, what can I get for you?" Not a flinch, not a hesitation. Just warmth. I ordered tea, my hands only trembling a little, and sat near the window. As I waited, I placed the suitcase beside my chair, resting my hand on it as though it were a living thing. For a moment, I just watched people passing outside, each caught in their own little currents, unaware of how monumental this morning was for me. When my tea arrived, I thanked the barista with a voice that didn't sound out of place anymore. I sipped in silence, and then it happened. A single tear slid down my cheek, not from fear or shame or confusion. It came from relief. It came from the quiet, expansive realization that the world did not collapse when I stepped into it, that nothing shattered, that no one pointed, no one whispered, no one broke the fragile internal scaffolding I'd built over 5 years. The only thing breaking was the wall I'd kept around my own reflection. When I finished my drink, I stepped outside into the sunlight with a steadier stride. The air felt lighter, the world broader. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to hide behind a name, or a role, or someone else's authority. I felt like myself, simple as that, astonishing as that. The walk back home wasn't frightening. It was quiet, almost peaceful. The suitcase no longer felt heavy. My steps didn't tremble. And when I reached the familiar gate and opened it, Mistress Alina stood on the patio, arms folded, watching as though she'd known exactly what I would discover. "Well," she asked. I set the suitcase down and let out a breath that carried 5 years of fear, awe, devotion, and transformation. I met her eyes without flinching. It felt like the first time I've ever been real. Mistress Alina smiled, not proud, not triumphant, but deeply, warmly relieved. "Then your 5 years were worth it," she said gently. "Every moment." I walked toward her, the petticoats brushing softly around my legs like a promise. She didn't step back. She didn't instruct or correct. She simply reached out and held my hands, anchoring me to a truth I had finally chosen for myself. And in that still, golden moment, I understood what these 5 years had truly been. Not a lesson in obedience. A journey toward authenticity. A slow, deliberate uncovering of a self I didn't know I was allowed to be. And now that I had stepped into the world as her, quiet, steady, brave, I understood something even deeper. I could never go back.